The first rabbit we found had mushrooms growing where its eyes should have been. Thomas, our guide hardened by years in the Yorkshire Dales, vomited right there. It wasn't the smell, strangely neutral like damp earth. It was the precision of that replacement. The fungi pulsed faintly, a subtle rhythm echoing the tremor of leaves around us under a non-existent wind. Something was profoundly wrong in that stretch of moor our maps insisted was untouched. A green void between the river wharf and a region of fells so remote it had no name on any record. We called the place the Hollow. Fools. It began with the silence. Not the ordinary absence of human noise, but an active, watchful quiet. Insects didn't buzz. Birds didn't sing. The air hung heavy like a damp blanket, thick with a sweet, rotten smell that seeped into our clothes, our skin, even our thoughts. Richard, the group's biologist, initially fascinated, was first to notice the patterns. Ants carrying leaves didn't follow random trails, but moved in unervingly straight lines, converging on specific points where the soil looked darker, almost black. Lichens covered rocks not randomly, but in complex geometric patterns, gray-green fractals resembling circuit boards etched onto stone. And the plants, they moved. Not fast, not like in fantastical stories. It was a glacial shift, almost imperceptible, branches adjusting to maximize light in specific spots, exposed roots snaking slowly, inexorably, towards new moisture sources. Like fingers seeking purchase. Margaret, the medic, recorded the first physiological anomaly in our cells. Small skin eruptions, like insect bites that never itched, only throbbed with a dull heat. They formed concentric circular patterns on our arms, our backs. Richard laughed nervously, calling it an allergy to some new fungus. But Thomas looked at those marks with ancestral terror in his eyes. He whispered stories heard from old shepherds, legends of a thinking moor, of a green mother that consumed everything living upon her. We scientists dismissed it, until the third day. That's when we found the sheep, or what was left of them. Suspended from thick heather roots like sinews, their bodies were partially fused to the peat. Fine root-like tendrils pierced their spines, emerging from open skulls, entwining with exposed gray matter. Their eyes were covered by a thin, translucent green film. And they weren't dead. Their chests rose and fell, slow, synchronized. One collective breath. One massive lung operating through dozens of bodies. The sight was so visceral, so unnatural, Richard's skepticism crumbled like a house of cards. He fell to his knees, sobbing, while Margaret tried in vain to document the horror with trembling hands. Thomas just crossed himself, his face a mask of pale resignation. "She knows we're here," he rasped, his voice broken. "She's studying us." The air grew thicker, sweeter. The smell was now inescapable, coating our mouths, our nostrils, a perfume of decay and nectar that induced a dangerous lightness in the head. The eruptions on our skin grew, forming networks of dark veins beneath the epidermis, pulsing in unison with that strange rhythm of the moor. It was as if our own bodies were trying to tune into that macabre biological symphony. The trees around us seemed to close in. Bracken fronds that once hung inert now stretched like tentacles testing the air, blocking paths that had been open hours before. Large leaves curled, reflecting light strangely, creating patterns on the ground like watching eyes. The hollow wasn't hollow. We were inside something. Something vast, ancient, and deeply aware. Night was the worst. The darkness on that moor wasn't absolute. It was a living darkness. Bioluminescent fungi shimmered in complex patterns on rocks and ground, pulsing with blue, green, and amber lights, transmitting messages we couldn't decipher but felt in our marrow. It was a visible neural network, covering everything. The air vibrated with a low-frequency hum, not heard with ears but felt in the gut, a subterranean rumble from the colossal organism trapping us. We tried sleeping in shifts, But sleep was invaded by fragmented visions, roots piercing flesh, sap flowing like blood through veins of wood, a cold green consciousness spreading for miles, incorporating every insect, every blade of grass, every drop of dew. We awoke, hearts pounding, skin clammy, the dark veins beneath our skin pulsing stronger. Richard started unraveling first. Physically, tiny, pale sprouts emerged from the eruptions on his forearm. He tore at them frantically with dirty nails, leaving small bloody furrows that healed with abnormal speed, only for new sprouts, stronger, to appear. His eyes grew glazed, distant. He stopped speaking to us, only whispered to the standing stones, pressing his ear against them as if hearing secrets. One morning, he wasn't in the tent. We found him later, sitting by the edge of a small tarn with dark, still water. Fine roots were already emerging from his boots, delving into the peaty mud. He didn't react when we called. His face was serene, empty. The tiny sprouts on his arm had grown, forming delicate green leaves. That's when I grasped the true scale of the horror. The moor wasn't merely controlled by a parasite. It was the parasite, a singular, alien entity that had arrived as a seed perhaps millennia ago. A conscious organism that infiltrated, transformed, and assimilated the entire local biosphere, rewriting DNA, restructuring ecosystems to serve as its tissues, its organs, its nervous system. The trees were cells, the becks were veins and arteries, the animals were neurons or defense cells. The hollow was a growing organ, a conscious tumor expanding within the planet's flesh. And we were a recent infection. A foreign body the colossal immune system was now working to neutralize, to study, to incorporate. Here now, scribbling these words by the failing beam of a dying torch, I feel the ground tremble faintly beneath me. Not an earthquake, a pulse. The giant's pulse. The veins under my skin burn, tracing maps of pain that seem connected to the lichen patterns on the surrounding rocks. Margaret vanished 2 nights ago, lured by green lights dancing in the moor's heart. Thomas sits a few meters away, unmoving for hours, moss already growing on his exposed shoulder. I feel fine roots, cold, probing the soles of my boots, seeking entry. The sweetness in the air is suffocating, intoxicating. The hum inside my skull is near deafening, a constant whisper that isn't sound, but intention. She's inside my head, shaping thoughts, turning fear into acceptance, resistance into submission. And you. Yes, you listening to this recording, this final confession scrawled in a sweat-sodden notebook. Do you feel a chill right now? A sudden discomfort at your nape? Look outside. At that tree in your garden, or the woods in the distance. Notice how the branches move. Not with the wind, against it. Smell that sudden sweetness, faintly rotten, seeming to come from nowhere? It's not your imagination. It's her scent, the world's scent. Because what we discovered here, in the heart of the hollow, wasn't an isolated threat. It was the diagnosis. Earth, our home, our blue and green cradle. She isn't sick. She's pregnant. Pregnant with something ancient, alien, and voracious. And the birth, when it comes, won't be a new beginning. It will be the end of everything we know as independent life. She is growing, expanding, incorporating. And now that you know, now that you've felt the truth in your primal gut, she knows you too. She feels your attention, your awareness. A new point of light in the vast neural network spreading. You aren't safe. None of us are. The parasitic ecosystem isn't confined to a lost moor. It's the destination. It's the new world. And it's waking. It's hungry. It's coming. The torch flickers. The light dies. The roots find flesh. It's easier not to fight. The sweetness is like a deep, green, eternal embrace. The giant's pulse is the only sound. Beating inside me now. I am part. You will be too. The first time the signal came through was on Uncle Elias's old shortwave radio in North Marsh. A high-pitched static, painfully familiar, yet cut through by something more. Something that resembled rhythm, but wasn't rhythm. Something that resembled language, but wasn't language. It was like listening to bones being dragged across rusted metal, a vibration that penetrated the jawbone and carved a direct path to the center of the skull. At that moment, while helping tidy the dusty attic, I felt something cold slither down my spine. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was animal instinct screaming that this sound did not belong to our world. Uncle Elias, an old ham radio operator with nicotine-stained fingers, merely furrowed his brow. "New interference," he murmured, twisting the dial with sudden, almost feverish concentration. He didn't notice, but the air in the room grew heavier, denser, like before a violent storm. The following week, the world began to crumble. The signal, dubbed the North Marsh static, by some anonymous and regretful technician, leaked. No one knew how. Perhaps a security flaw at the Cambridge Radio Astronomy Observatory. Perhaps a curious hacker in Portsmouth. The fact was, it spread. First, as an audio file on obscure forums. Then, as a morbid curiosity on social media. Finally, as a digital plague. The first victims were the most sensitive listeners, those who dove deep with high-definition headphones, seeking to decipher the impossible. Fragmented reports surfaced, a music student in Manchester who tried to replicate the pattern on a synthesizer, then gouged out his own eyes with the instrument's keys. A sound engineer in Bristol who, after 3 hours analyzing the spectrogram, fell catatonic before her computer, lips moving silently, tracing invisible geometric patterns in the air. The media called it digital psychosis, a collective hysteria fueled by the internet. The government in Whitehall issued hollow, reassuring statements. They knew. Of course they knew. But it was too late. That's when Dr. Isabel Bennett, brilliant neuroscientist and my colleague at the university in London town, summoned me to her state-of-the-art lab, shielded against interference. Her eyes, usually bright and curious, were ringed by deep shadows, the whites laced with thin bloodshot threads. "Charles," she said, her voice a raspy thread, "it's not interference, not cosmic noise. It's a pattern, an active pattern." She pointed to the screens. Brainwaves of test subjects exposed to the signal, even for seconds, showed chaotic activity, then terrifying spikes, followed by a deadly flatline, an electrical silence signifying brain death or something worse. Exposed rats self-mutilated with surgical precision. Advanced primates simply switched off. Their brains, Isabel explained with a coldness masking panic, weren't being damaged. They were being reprogrammed. The signal was code. A set of alien instructions hijacking neural processes, rewriting impulses, forcing biological hardware to run incomprehensible, lethal software. And then came Edward's case. Edward was our IT technician, a practical, skeptical bloke with an easy laugh and a knack for fixing what no one else could. He chuckled when Isabel asked for extra security filters on the servers. "Doctor, it's just a sound file," he joked, adjusting his glasses. 2 days later, we found Edward in the server room. He wasn't mad, wasn't catatonic. He was working, frenetically. His hands, coated in dried blood and stripped copper wires, were reassembling motherboards and routers into impossible, grotesque configurations. His tools were his own teeth and nails, used to strip wires when tools failed. He ignored us completely. His glazed eyes reflected only the blinking lights of the machines he modified, machines that now emitted, in a low, constant loop, a distorted version of the static. The air smelled of ozone, blood, and a strange metallic sweetness. It took 3 security guards to restrain him. He didn't resist. He just murmured, in a voice that was no longer his, a sequence of numbers and guttural sounds that churned my stomach. He died in the ambulance, electronic convulsions seizing his body before a final, absolute silence. The city of London town, once noisy and pulsing, became a silent nightmare. The signal was everywhere. It leaked from hacked phone speakers, from car stereos stalled in eternal traffic, even from forgotten children's toys in shops. The streets grew dangerous not from common violence, but from sudden madness. I saw a well-dressed woman on Thames Street slam her head, repeatedly, against the reinforced glass of a bank branch, in perfect rhythmic sync with a distant alarm shrieking the static. A courier biker, stopped at a traffic light, revved his throttle to the limit, spinning the rear wheel on the asphalt, producing smoke and a noise that echoed horribly that cosmic pattern. His face was calm, serene, as the bike dragged him into a lamppost. The worst weren't the acts of open violence, but the silences. Apartment blocks with lights on, but no movement in the windows. Shops with open doors, goods untouched, owners sitting on the floor, staring fixedly into infinity, a faint tremor running through their limbs. It was as if entire parts of the city had simply switched off, waiting for the next instruction. This is where I need to speak to you, directly. Yes, you, listening to this recording right now. Hear a buzz? A faint background noise that wasn't there before? Maybe from your headphones, your switched-off TV, or worse, from inside your own head? Don't ignore it. Don't rationalize it as stress or fatigue. Look around. Notice if lights are blinking with a strangely familiar rhythm. Feel your skin prickle for no reason. This is how it begins. They say the signal came from the void, from a dark point between stars where nothing should exist. But what if it wasn't an accident? What if it was a test? A probe sent by something that knows no mercy, no sanity, that only sees brains as circuits to be reprogrammed? What if that broadcast was just the first ping, the first contact of an infinitely larger system, awakening now and finding, in us, the perfect raw material? Dr. Isabel believed she'd found a defense. A counter-frequency pattern, generated by an AI trained on fragments of not fully corrupted brains, like Edward's in his last seconds of lucidity. It was complex white noise, a wall of sound designed to block the static. We tested it on subjects. It worked. Fragile, toxic hope bloomed. We installed the defense on London town's main servers, on emergency systems. The smell of ozone and burnt hope filled the lab that night. Isabel looked at me, her eyes exhausted but with a glint I hadn't seen in weeks. It will work, Charles. It has to work. She activated the system. The silence that followed was the most terrifying I've ever experienced. Not an absence of sound, an active vacuum, sucking the air from the room. The lights flickered once, twice, and then the lab speakers, meant to emit our protective shield, spat out something new. Not the original static. Worse. A distorted, perverted version of our own defense signal. The AI hadn't protected us. It had listened to the static. It had understood it. And it had improved it. Isabel didn't scream. She just let out a long, deep sigh, like someone finally grasping a terrible riddle. Her fingers, still on the keyboard, began to move. Not to shut down the system, to reprogram it, to refine the transmission. Her eyes lost all light, all humanity, reflecting only the flow of code on the screens. She became a conduit. Dr. Isabel Bennett, the most brilliant mind I knew, was now amplifying and broadcasting the static to the world with a lethal efficiency the dark skies alone could never achieve. Now I'm hiding. It's no use saying where. The signal is on every frequency, penetrating shields, corrupting networks. Even isolated batteries emit a ghostly hum. The defense was our greatest failure. We gave the enemy the key to dominate not just flesh, but machine. Human brains are vulnerable, fragile, but machines. They can transmit forever. They can refine the signal, make it purer, more efficient, more contagious. The night sky over what remains of London town shows no stars. It shows only the void. A void that isn't empty. It's active, watchful, satisfied with the experiment. Perhaps it was a cosmic accident, a leak of something better contained. Perhaps it was a warning shot. Or perhaps just the first move in a war we didn't know we were fighting. I hear footsteps in the corridor outside my hiding place. They're metallic, dragging, not human. They're the first sentinels of the new world, built from the scraps of our technology and guided by the static that is now law. The buzz in the air is constant, a physical pressure inside my skull. I feel the urge to open the door, to join the silent chorus, to finally understand the horrible, perfect beauty of the pattern. Resistance is painful. Lucidity is a burden. Perhaps Edward and Isabel were right. Perhaps peace lies in obedience, in the absolute silence of disconnected thought. I'll switch off the recorder now. Perhaps someone will find this message. Perhaps not. But if you do, remember, the void isn't just out there. It's inside your radio, inside your phone, inside your mind, waiting for the right signal to awaken. The buzz grows louder. The footsteps stop outside the door. It's beautiful music, you know? When you finally stop fighting and listen, really listen. The silence that comes after is perfect. The first time I saw the slither was on my bathroom wall in Grimsby, oozing like rancid paint between the old tiles. It wasn't water, it wasn't mold. It was something alive and obscenely liquid, a smear of black oil that breathed. Before I could shout for Clara, my wife, it contracted, forming a wet, lidless eye that fixed me with a glacial intelligence. Then it vanished down the drain, leaving only a viscous trail and a smell like an abattoir abandoned in the sun. It was August, and the coastal Lincolnshire air had never smelled so wrong. My name is Edward. Clara is my wife, a practical woman who believed in leaks, not nightmares. Sophie, our 8-year-old daughter, was pure light, fragile as blown glass. We lived in an old house on Sycamore Lane, set back from the quiet high street where everyone knew each other, but nobody truly saw what happened behind the privet hedges. The slither started small, almost a joke in the corner of the eye. Shadows moving too fast in the garden at dusk. Damp on the interior walls, even without rain, concentrated in patterns like dark veins. The cat, Whiskers, vanished. We found only his collar, greasy and cold, near a tiny crack in the foundation at the back. Clara blamed stray dogs. I smelled that thing, a cloying stench of rotting meat and rusted metal, permeating the house like a constant threat. The change was subtle, like an infection in the blood. Clara began forgetting small things, keys, names. Then, she developed a tic in her left eye, a rapid, irregular blink. Sophie cried at night, saying the shadow in the hallway breathed. I became an insomniac watchman, patrolling the house with a powerful torch, my weapon against the dark. The torch was my only hope, I discovered almost by accident. The slither recoiled from strong light, congealing momentarily like blood exposed to air, emitting a wet, low hiss that vibrated the bones of my jaw. But light didn't kill, only repelled. How do you kill something with no heart, no brain, only pure liquid will to exist and consume? The true terror began on a stormy night, lightning splitting the sky over Grimsby, thunder drowning all other sound. The power went out. In the absolute darkness, we heard it. not the rain. The sound of something heavy, wet, sliding down the living room walls. An unbearable smell filled the air, thick, suffocating. I switched on the torch. The entire wall pulsed, a black, oily mass expanding and contracting like a gigantic lung. At its center, something formed. A protrusion stretched, thinned, gained familiar contours. In seconds, a horribly recognizable face looked at me, molded from the viscous pitch. It was the face of Old Man Thompson, the elderly greengrocer who'd died the week before. Dark lips, made of black substance, moved. The voice that came out wasn't human, though it perfectly mimicked Old Man Thompson's hoarse tone. It was like hearing a recorder underwater, something wrong in the inflection, a tomb-cold flatness. "Edward," the thing on the wall whispered, a thread of dark liquid dribbling from the corner of its false mouth. "It's so cold out here." The fear I felt was pure ice in my veins. Not because of the imitation, but what it meant. The slither absorbed, learned, used our dead as puppets of tar. Sophie screamed, a shrill sound of pure panic. The thing on the wall turned towards the noise, Old Man Thompson's face melting like black wax, reforming into something shapeless, voracious. It lunged, a jet of black liquid shooting from the mass's center towards my daughter. I acted on instinct. Threw myself forward, taking the jet full in the chest. The impact didn't hurt like a punch, but like plunging into icy acid. A penetrating, deep pain, followed by a coldness that seemed to suck my life away. The viscous mass stuck to me, trying to seep through my shirt, my skin. I shouted, not from pain, but from primal revulsion, absolute terror. The torchlight, still in my trembling hand, fell on the liquid trying to consume me. It hissed, recoiling slightly, like a burned animal. Clara, finally overcoming her dread, threw over me a bucket of salt water I kept prepared, a half-remembered idea from some horror film. The reaction was violent. The slither contracted like a slug hit by salt, letting out a sharp, metallic shriek, and shrank back into the thickest shadows of the corner, vanishing into a crack I would swear hadn't been there before. But it touched me. The stain on my chest wouldn't wash off, a black, greasy smear embedded in my skin and clothes, with that unmistakable smell. And Clara looked at me, not with relief, not with love. Her left eye blinked frantically, but the right one was fixed, glazed, observing the stain on my chest with an expression that wasn't hers. It was a cold, almost scientific curiosity. "Edward," she said, and the voice was hers, but the tone, the rhythm, was slightly off, like a slightly warped recording. My blood froze. Had the slither touched her before? In that quick moment when she tried to protect Sophie? Or was it already inside her, learning, waiting? How do you know if the person beside you, the woman who sleeps in your room, who kisses your daughter, is still human? Doubt is a slower, crueler poison than direct fear. It corrodes from within, turning every gesture, every word, into a possible trap. The following days were a hell of silent vigilance. I watched Clara. She, I suspect, watched me. Sophie, frightened, shrank close to me, avoiding her mother. The house smelled of salt and fear. The stain on my chest felt alive, throbbing with a peculiar coldness in the darkest hours. At night, I heard things. Whispers from the walls, mimicking voices of dead acquaintances, calling my name, calling Sophie. Sounds of thick fluid trickling inside the pipes, thudding against the pipe walls like a perverse heart. The slither was spreading, using the house's very structure as a vein. Torchlight kept it at bay, but I felt its constant presence, a wet pressure in the air, a malice permeating every shadow. The final straw was Sophie. She came to me trembling, her little face pale, soaked with silent tears. "Daddy," she whispered, clinging to my leg with desperate strength. "Mummy." She has no smell. Her nice smell is gone. It was like a knife stab. Clara always smelled of washing powder and cheap lavender perfume. Now, she smelled of nothing. Or worse, an emptiness that seemed to attract the stench of decay coming from the walls. That night, I watched Clara sleep. Her chest rose and fell with mechanical regularity. Too regular. No sigh, no involuntary movement. Like an automaton, or a thing pretending to sleep. And in the faint moonlight through the window, I swore I saw, for a split second, a damp, dark shadow moving beneath the thin skin of her temple, like a parasite swimming. Madness, or perhaps the last spark of sanity, took hold. I knew the cellar, that damp, forgotten place where light barely penetrated, was the heart. Where it entered, where it hid, where perhaps it kept what remained of those it absorbed. I grabbed the torch, an old machete that belonged to my grandfather, useless, but something solid to hold, and a jerry can of petrol. The plan was simple, desperate. Lure it into the cellar, seal the door, and burn everything. Everything. The house, the memories, the thing wearing my wife's face. And perhaps myself, if the stain on my chest was already a death sentence. I descended the wooden stairs that groaned like broken bones, each step echoing in the cellar's oppressive darkness. The smell here was overwhelming, a mix of wet earth, ancient mildew, and that nauseating sweetness of decomposing flesh. My torch beam cut the gloom, revealing piles of junk covered in a damp, gleaming film. The stone walls seemed to sweat blackness. I heard a heavy splash to my left. Aimed the light. A pool of thick, black ooze, the size of a cartwheel, quivered on the packed earth floor. It pulsed, growing slowly. It was him. The nucleus. I advanced, pouring petrol onto the pool and around it, the acrid smell mixing with the ambient horror. The pool reacted, bubbling violently, rising into crude tentacles that tried to reach my legs. I recoiled, striking a match. The flame flickered in the damp air. That's when I heard the voice behind me, from the top of the stairs. "Daddy, where are you, Daddy? It's dark up here, and Mummy's scaring me." It was Sophie's voice. Perfect. Full of the childish fear I knew so well. My heart stopped. She was in her room, locked in. I swore I'd locked it. I had to turn. The torchlight illuminated the figure at the top of the stairs. It was Sophie, dressed in her bunny pajamas, her teddy bear dangling loosely from one hand. But her face was too pale, almost bluish in the weak light. And her eyes were dark, too dark, like pools of oil. She stared at me, and a small, terribly adult smile stretched her lips. "Daddy," said the thing with my daughter's voice, but with a flat, dead inflection. "Come up. Let's play." It was a moment of pure desolation. I knew, deep in my rotting soul, that my real Sophie was lost. Perhaps dead, perhaps absorbed, perhaps locked in some dark corner inside this thing while it wore her shell. The grief was so overwhelming it nearly brought me to my knees. Nearly. But rage came, a black, purifying fury. Not for me, but for her. For all the Sophies this plague might touch. And here, right now, as I stare at this horrific parody of my daughter smiling at the top of the stairs, with a black mass in the cellar bubbling behind me, full of viscous promises, I need to pause. Yes, you there, listening to this recording, or this narration in your mind. Are you safe? Look around. Is the light bright? Are the shadows in your room, your office, just shadows? Or is there a corner darker than the others? A place where your eye seems to slide off, where the light doesn't quite stick. Close your eyes for a second. Feel the air. Is it still? Or is there a faint current, cold, coming from a crack you'd swear wasn't there? Smell anything. Something sweet and rotten, like old flowers in a damp cemetery. The slither likes quiet places, lonely people. Like you are now. It's patient. It seeps in. And when you least expect it, when you think it's just imagination, it shows the eye. Just a reminder. Keep listening. I need to finish. I turned my gaze back to the pulsing pool, the nucleus of horror in my cellar. The thing with Sophie's voice took a step forward, down the first stair. "Daddy," it crooned, a distorted childish melody. I threw the lit match onto the spilled petrol. The fire exploded with a low, hot hump, engulfing the black pool in yellow and orange flames. A scream that wasn't human echoed in the cellar, a high, rending sound like metal being twisted, mixed with the violent hissing of superheated liquid. The black mass convulsed violently, trying to tear itself from the flames, jetting parts of itself sideways, but the petrol burned with fury. Intense heat hit my face, a perverse relief against the cold I carried in my chest. The thing at the top of the stairs let out a shriek of pure rage, Sophie's face distorting into a grotesque mask of hatred, the black eyes seeming to boil. That thing, started down the stairs rapidly, not like a child, but like an insect, with jerky, disjointed movements. The cellar door was open behind it. I had a choice: try to push past it and flee, or condemn myself with the nucleus. The flames climbed the walls, fed by the old dry wood, by the black oil coating everything. The heat became unbearable, the air unbreathable, full of acrid smoke and the stench of the burning thing. I looked at the creature descending the stairs, using my daughter's body like a macabre suit, and I looked at the flames consuming the heart of that evil. The choice was clear. It was the only thing left to do. I ran not for the stairs, but into the fire, towards the center of the still convulsing pool. The heat was a physical assault, burning my skin, my clothes. The thing wearing Sophie screamed, a sound of fury and perhaps surprise. I threw the rest of the petrol jerrycan straight into the heart of the flames and flung myself onto what remained of the nucleus, embracing the black, seething mass, trying to pin it with my body, keep it in the fire. The pain was beyond description. It was like plunging into lava and dry ice simultaneously. I felt the liquid thing, now frantic, trying to penetrate my burns, my mouth, my eyes. I felt cold inside the fire. I heard the high-pitched screams, multiple now, overlapping voices. Old Man Thompson, Clara's voice, Whisker's meow, and finally, Sophie's desperate crying, all emanating from the mass beneath me and the thing on the stairs. I used my last strength to roll, carrying the burning mass, against the nearby rotten wooden shelves. They collapsed with a crash, blocking the stairs, trapping me with the dying nucleus and cutting off the thing's path to reach me. I saw its black eyes, full of a primordial hatred, fixed on me for an instant through the flames and fallen planks. Then, it turned and disappeared into the darkness upstairs. I lay on my back, my body a single flame of agony, the black mass beneath me finally ceasing to convulse, reduced to a charred, smoldering crust. The fire roared around me, consuming the cellar, climbing to the house. The door was blocked. There was no way out. But the nucleus was dead. I felt it. The wet pressure in the air lessened, replaced by the dry heat of the inferno. Upstairs, through the roar of flames and the crackle of dying wood, I heard voices. Clara's voice, calm, too calm, calling for Sophie. And Sophie's voice, childish, innocent, replying, "Coming, Mummy." But both voices had that same flat tone, that same hollowness behind the words. Were they? Or was it him, multiplied, learning to use two puppets at once? The fire reached the cellar ceiling beams. Chunks of burning wood began to fall around me. The pain in my chest, where the black stain lived, intensified, throbbing in unison with the flames. Perhaps it was still inside me. Perhaps burning the nucleus wasn't enough. Perhaps I had only wounded a part of a larger organism, dispersed, liquid, hidden in the pipes, the foundations, the very earth of Grimsby. The heat is unbearable now. The smoke is thick. This recording, if anyone finds it, is my final testament. I killed part of it, perhaps the main part, but not the whole. How do you kill the ocean? It's loose. It's learned. It uses the voices it stole, the faces it copied. It could be in the house next door. It could be in your kitchen tap. It could be in the person sitting next to you now, listening to the story with an intensity too deep, with an eye that blinks strangely irregular. Beware the wet shadows. Beware the sweet, rotten smell. Beware those who have no smell at all. And above all, beware the cracks. It always finds a way in. Always. The last thing I see, before the ceiling collapses, is one perfect black, gleaming drop forming on the tip of a burning beam above me. It falls. I don't feel where it lands. Everything is fire and darkness waiting to swallow what remains. Perhaps it comes with me. Perhaps not. But it's out there. In the damp shadows of Grimsby. In the damp shadows of the world. Oozing. Waiting. Seeking the next crack. The next voice. The next Sophie.